What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, reviewing today Judgment. In 2019, we've definitely seen a huge explosion of open world stuff, projects that manage to be expansive and interesting, but something I think that oftentimes they lack is they don't really have a soul to them. They need to try and have a story at the center of it to make you care about the universe, to try and put something in front of you that seems worthwhile and meaningful, and it's for this that I absolutely fell in love with Judgment. From the very beginning, they tell a crazy story that is so compelling and so just well written that it instantly became my favorite game of the year. Yes, I'm being serious. As of right now, Judgment is my game of the year. So let's talk a little bit about forgiveness. Everybody makes mistakes, right? We all make screw-ups, we all just have little tiny errors or flaws. Whereas sometimes there are things that happen, mistakes we make that are so bad they cannot be forgiven. And I think that this is one of the core concepts that lies at the very center of Judgment. We're playing as a detective that lives in this giant open city, and as he goes around, we're going to be beating up people, doing mini-games, trying to explore and do side quests. But all of this is for a grander purpose. You see, our hero Yagami wasn't always a detective. In fact, just a couple of years ago, he was a very famous lawyer. Somebody who managed to win cases that seemed completely impossible, get suspects off the hook for crimes it seems like they committed. And he was very good at this until one day when it led to a woman being murdered by one of the people he got out of court, and now he has to live with those sins. Instead of just disappearing or choosing to completely leave the city though, Yagami realizes that sin is not always evil. Sometimes you can make a mistake and just completely ruin lives, but if you stick around and try your best to improve the city, maybe, somehow, at the end of the day, things can get better. So being a private detective, we basically are going to be taking any sort of freaking case we can, anything to try and pay the bills, which means that certain times you're going to be trying to track down a cheating husband and snap that perfect photo of his infidelity, or maybe you're just going to be chasing down suspects in the streets who you know have committed some terrible crimes, or sneaking into an evil Yakuza headquarters to try and save a kidnapped woman. You really have no idea what you're doing from case to case, but all of this fits together in the bigger story, which is the fact that Yagami is trying to track down a very evil serial killer that nobody else even has the guts to pursue. There's some sort of mysterious figure who's actually been haunting this town, and unfortunately, he's picking people off one by one, and now citizens are turning up dead with their eyes cut out of their brain. I mean, it is a pretty horrendous sight, which is why it's kind of understandable that even the police don't want to mess with this. They're afraid of being next. And so now only Yagami, as a private investigator, has decided to try and track down who is doing this, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it. But obviously this is not going to be an easy thing. If every other detective in the entire city couldn't crack the case, how can we? Well, that's sort of the thing. This is a big, complicated game that does so much that is just so right. Now, if you've ever played any of the Yakuza games, there's certainly some stuff that's going to be very familiar in this. It's actually the same studio, so you'll notice that this is sort of the same town, it's got the same layout, but other than the cosmetic look and some things like the engine, I consider this a very different and very good standalone experience. To begin with, let's really dig into the combat, because this is so freaking sharp. Yagami is a martial artist who uses sort of his own style of fighting, and whenever you get jumped by people, whether it be in the streets or in a boss fight, you need to try and adapt to the scenarios around you. You see, there are lots of different strong and fast attacks that you can unleash, but also multiple stances. That way you can try and shift into a certain style for a certain situation. Maybe you need to do wider kicks tactics to try and knock everybody back, or if somebody has a really big weapon, maybe it's a lot safer to go into more of a defensive style like Tiger and try and single target somebody down. Now there's an additional aspect of this that you need to keep in mind, which is wounding. So obviously you're just a normal guy and anything can heal back, right? Well, this isn't always the case. If you are shot or stabbed or cut by some jerk who has a giant samurai sword in the streets, these wounds are permanent. The only way to get them fixed is to buy a very expensive repair kit to try and patch up your scars, or to find the secret underground doctor. Now this is something I actually like about it because it makes it where you end up being much more paranoid in every single encounter, because it makes it where if you screw up, there is a very lasting detriment to the mistakes you make. You need to try and eliminate people fast and worry about your upgrades. So obviously in a lot of the previous Yakuza games, there were lots of different ways to try and customize combat. You could buy all sorts of different special moves, or just basically get different skills to make you a little bit sharper when things go bad. Well, I always thought that system was fun and really good, but it was definitely very, very multifaceted. In Yakuza games, when you were playing them, you had like 10 different styles of experience points. There was battle, there was smartness, there was heart for just talking to people, and you needed all of these different experience points to level up. Well, in Judgment, they decided to ultra simplify this. Basically what you're looking at is the only experience points, and you get it for doing everything. So if you want to try and do side quests and just help out people in the city and make their lives a little bit better, well, that can give you experience points. If you just want to wander around and beat up random muggers in the different alleyways, well, that's also a way to try and level yourself up. Additionally, just by being a good detective, you can get all sorts of additional skill points that I really, really like. There's this really interesting system where when you're talking to people and you're trying to question a suspect, you get to pick the things you ask. And if you are more efficient in how you ask them and basically ask the most direct line of questioning to get the information the most efficiently, it will give you an experience bonus. There's all sorts of that. When you're picking a lock, maybe you'll be able to crack it a lot faster and again earn a nice EXP bonus. It's something that makes it where just by playing the game good, you're going to be perpetually unlocking new styles of attack, new silly bonuses, and just new stuff that makes playing even more fun. Now, to try and go along with this, obviously you're not going to be always investigating. You're a human, you want time off, and this city is filled with great things to do. In fact, I think that there's more minigames in this than any other project that this studio has ever worked on. Just by walking down the street, you can just straight up, with no load screens, walk out of a bar, go into a random place and start playing pinball, or walk into a giant multi-story arcade and walk up to every single machine to play things like old fighting games, or maybe this cool knockoff of House of the Dead, or maybe you want to be super crazy and just do something like drone racing. There is a huge built-in drone racing side quest in here that actually you can do over and over again, the way you're racing people, mastering tracks, and earning definitely giant unlockables to further tinker with your drone so it can turn faster and be better. There is so many side activities that you can easily put hundreds of hours in this game and not a single bit of it ever feels dry or dull. I do want to say that this is a much more serious project overall. If you've played previous stuff by this studio, you know that they like to try and throw in lots of serious humor and mix it up with the exuberant and the eccentric. They like to try and have something goofy and then something dark, something goofy and then something dark. Well, in Judgment, well, it seems like everything's dark. For the most part, it seems like everybody you're trying to encounter and everybody you're trying to help is pretty much screwed. But I honestly love that. I honestly like having such a somber tone to a town that's just constantly filled with so much death and craziness. You really feel like somebody who is trying to protect this town. I mean, in a way, this just dawned on me. You basically get to be Japanese Batman, and I dig it. I seriously wish they just put that in the box art because that's what it feels like. It's so cool to try and do things like 1 minute you're trying to hack into Twitter to try and get somebody's information and track them down on the streets, and then you're trying to video chat with somebody and figure out the next clue of the next victim, or actually investigating different crime scenes, or saving somebody from their stalker ex. There are so many different stories all going on at once, and so many different tiny little tales being told in this really corrupt city, and all of them are so freaking great. I mean, at all in this entire game, in all the hours I played it, the only tiny gripe I have is that sometimes I think that some of the sound effects are kind of bad. I mean, that's literally the only thing in this game that is not perfect, is that some of the sound effects don't make sense, and that's it. Literally everything else in this is so sharp and so dead on, it is exactly what I would want in a game. It is an open world experience that manages to be both aspects of what it should be. It's open in that it gives you choices in every single aspect of what you want to do, and secondary, it is a world. It is an existing, living, breathing area where every single person in the streets has their own story, their own thing they're doing. You'll see them stop and take pictures of different stuff, or random people just talking out loud about a date they had. This is such a sharp experience, and definitely my game of the year thus far. Okay, so we've heard a lot of good and one tiny bad, but let's go over to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Judgment a 10 out of 10. If you've ever found yourself looking at the Yakuza series and thinking, man, those seem fun, but it's just so long I don't know where to start, buy this game. I'm not even joking, you will not regret it. This game is so good, I just still can't even believe how sharp it is, and the best part of all is that it stands on its own. You don't need to play anything before it to get the full maximum enjoyment and love every single part of it. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.